Hi, today I'm going to talk about the differences between an ESP8266 and an ESP32, specifically when used with WLED and the sound reactive version of WLED. So hang around. Hi, welcome to Resin Chem Tech. Today's video is inspired by a comment from one of my subscribers. WLED has supported the ESP32 for a while now, but most of my videos I'm always using the Wemos D1 Mini, which is an 8266 chip. He wanted to know about the comparison between these two chips and whether one would be more advantageous over the other. So today we're going to take a look at these side by side and do comparisons of features and performance. Let's get started. So before we get into the differences in features and performance between the ESP8266 and the ESP32, I want to take a brief moment to talk about physical size differences. If you've watched most of my other projects, you know I love to use these little electro cookie solderable prototype boards. The nice thing is it's much like a breadboard, and you've already got connections between your columns without having to do solder bridges. And my go-to board for most of my WLED projects is the Wemos D1 Mini, the 8266, but I like it because it's small enough that it just fits onto this small size electro cookie with just enough room for the logic level shifter and allows me to make a very small controller. If we move up to the equivalent ESP32 version of the D1 Mini, the first thing you'll notice is it has additional pins because it has 2 rows of pins on each side. So first of all, it's going to fill up all the way to the side of this small board, leaving no pins on the outside for connecting your wiring to. In addition, since these are 2 rows of pins here and here, and your columns are joined back here, you would only be able to use either the inner or outer row of pins on each side, because otherwise you'd be connecting these pins side by side together with the breadboard. So the other option is we move up to what's called the Node MCU style, which is going to give us a lot more pins in both cases. And in the case of the ESP32, they're not stacked in double rows, but we will have to move up to a larger prototype board. Again, if we look at the ESP3266, you'll notice that I can get it turned around here with the light. When it's mounted on here, there's still 1 row of available pins on each side for you to connect your wiring to the pins. If we move up to the ESP32, you'll notice that it is actually 1 row wider. So while there are pins available or holes available on this side for the pins, there's nothing on this side. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to put these on pin headers so I have the ability to remove this and do my wiring actually underneath the board on each side. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about the size differences because it could impact your project. I'm going to go ahead and get some pin headers set up on these and we'll move on from there. So I now have both of my boards built. The ESP8266 here on the left, the ESP32 here on the right. I'm not going to go into full details on how to build these controllers. I do have a separate video on building your own LED controller if you're interested, but I did want to cover a couple of things here as it relates to the testing we're going to be doing. First and foremost, both boards were built as identically as possible. They use the same gauge wire, the same length of wire, and the same process. In both cases, I followed the recommendations on either the official WLED website or the Sound Reactive WLED website in terms of use of pins. Now, with the latest version of WLED 12.0, I believe, the ESP8266 now supports a maximum output of 3 channels, although the use of only 1 is recommended. That's one of the things we're going to test. The ESP32 will support a maximum output of 10 different channels, although a maximum of 4 is recommended. But because of the limitation of 3, I've built both these boards to have 3 different channel outputs. Pull these off here just so you can see underneath here the 3 channels for each. In both cases, all 3 channels are running through a logic level shifter. So we should be shifting our voltage up to 5 volts for both of these. And when it comes to the sound testing, again, I used the recommendation off the Sound Reactive WLED website. And I'm using a Max 9814 microphone with the gain set to 40 dB, which is what is recommended. And we'll be using that again, on both controller boards. Okay, let's take a quick look at the test board that I've set up. On this board, I've installed independent 100 pixel WS2812B LED strips. Each 100 pixel strip is connected to a different output channel of our controller, the ESP8266 on the left, the ESP32 on the right. Each set of strips and controller are powered by separate but identical 5-volt 30-amp power supplies, which ought to be more than enough power to power all the strips on both sides. But just to be sure that we're not seeing any voltage drop, I'm also doing 5-volt voltage injection at the top of each strip, as well as the 5-volt input at the bottom of the strip. Okay, here we go. So we've got both strips powered on, and by default, the first 30 pixels of the first channel light up in orange, which is true. Just so you can see here, I am running the latest release version, which at the time of this recording is 0.12.0. And you can see this is the ESP8266 and these the ESP32 version. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go in here and configure these for the right number of LEDs. So in our first strip, we have 100. We'll go ahead and save that. And we can immediately see our strip lit up with all 100 pixels. We'll do the same thing over here. And we need 100 there. Okay, so functionally, there isn't any real difference that I can see. We both have the same effects available. Again, this is the standard version, not the sound reactive version. We're going to get to that next. Both versions support segments. Like I said, the big difference is the number of pixels and the number of channels that the ESP32 supports over the ESP8266. So honestly, I don't expect to see any difference here with a single 100 pixel strip, but we will run it through the paces here. We'll just set this on, both of them on full white. Take the brightness up all the way, which is probably going to overwhelm the camera a bit. But again, even if you can't see it on the screen, sitting here staring at them, I see zero difference between the two. Let's turn that brightness back down because that's really just a function of the current and the power. So let's just try a couple of effects here. I don't know which ones might be good here. Try to do the same on both. Let's again turn up the speed and the intensity on both. And again, I see no real effect. Let's try. And again, I'm seeing, which you can probably tell on the video, but I'm definitely seeing no difference between the two strips at this point. Okay, so let's go ahead now and add the second strip to both controllers. And to do that, we have to go back into our Wi-Fi config, LED preferences, and we're going to need to add right here. Again, this one, in this case, for the ESP8266, we're going to use pin 1. We're going to start at 100 on our pixel count and go to 200. And again, the total LED count here is now 200. So that should be that. Let's save that. Okay, we now see we've got the two strips lit. So let's go ahead and do that over here on the ESP32 as well. Once again, we're going to add an output. In the case of the ESP32, the second is pin 18. I'll start again at 100 for a count of 100, which also changes our LED count to 200. And we will save that. Now, you'll notice that both strips currently are doing the same thing. If we want to be able to have each output channel do something different, we need to add something called segments. So right now, this first segment is set for both strips together a total of 200. We want to add a segment, and we're going to stop this segment at 100. And we're going to start this one at 100 and go to 200. Okay. So now, let's do the same thing over here with ESP32. Whoops. Segments. Add a segment. This one 100. Start this one at 100, 200. So now we have different control of each. So, okay, so there are two different output channels, two different segments. Again, I'm seeing no real difference between the ESP32 and the ESP8266. So at this point, let's move on to adding the third channel. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and I've added the third strip, and I've also set up that third segment. I won't take you through that again and waste the time. One thing I do want you to notice in here on the ESP8266, notice our LED memory usage compared to the same setup with the ESP32. Again, we're only running a total of 300 pixels. So in a small installation in your house, you know, around a pool table, under cabinets, something like that, probably not going to see a performance problem. I'm not seeing anything here. But my guess is it's not going to take long before you start adding more and more pixels before you are going to start seeing a performance hit. You know, especially if you're going to like put these outside on your house for Christmas decorations or something like that, you're quickly going to run into problems here. But at least in this case with standard WLED, I'm unable to get any performance difference right now between the ESP8266 and the ESP32. So I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to flash the sound reactive version onto both chips, and then we'll come back and test the sound reactive version to see if we see any difference there. Okay, I'm back. I've flashed both the ESP8266 and the ESP32 with the respective versions of sound reactive WLED. I've attached the Max 9814 mics to both control boards, and I've set up a little Bluetooth speaker that's going to act as our sound for these two versions during our test. Okay, I've gone ahead and set up the three different output pins on both of these. I've not done segments yet, but it's done in exactly the same way as with standard WLED. However, for the first time, we're going to see some functional differences between the ESP8266 and the ESP32. Right off the get-go, you'll notice you've got some additional sliders when it comes to effects on the ESP32. These are where you can fine-tune frequency settings. I won't go into a lot of details, but it's something that's available on the ESP32 that you don't find available on the ESP8266. Also, you'll notice that if we go into our LED preferences on both of these, you'll notice another difference. Notice that the ESP32 has support for a matrix layout. So a 2D matrix where you could have effects go across rows and columns. That is not available in the ESP8266. So when it comes to sound reactive WLED, there are some functional differences available to you on the ESP32. Okay, you'll notice that you have basically all the same types of color palettes and color selection in the sound reactive that you have in the non-sound reactive or standard version of WLED. If we take a look at the effects though, you'll notice on the ESP32, you'll have some additional 2D effects, both sound reactive and non-sound reactive, that aren't available on the ESP3266. Again, those refer to that matrix setup that's not available with the ESP8266. So let's fire up some music and take a look at how these react. First off, I'm going to apologize for the music selection, but with copyright strikes and all of that kind of stuff, I had to select some music that was available in the public domain. So here we go. Okay, so right off the get-go, let's just select a simple maybe mid-noise here and look at the two comparisons. Now, right off the get-go, at least I can see, I don't know how it's coming across in the video, but the ESP32 is definitely reacting to the music much quicker than the ESP8266. The ESP8266 seems to have a little bit of lag and isn't quite as much in sync with the music. Let's take a look at a different effect. Okay, that was a little intense. Let's try. It's a little bit hard to tell there as well. So let's try a different one to see if we can see differences. Okay. Now there's a slight bit of difference because of the gain level with the microphones. It was hard to get them to match exactly. But I think here you can definitely see the lag with the ESP8266. And again, this is just using a single segment at this point, although we are using all 3 pins. Take a look at maybe one more here. So again, I'm seeing much more reactive effects to the music with the ESP32. So I'm going to go ahead and break these up into 3 different segments, each with their own noise effect, and we'll come back and see how they perform there. Okay, I've went ahead and divided each of the 100 pixel strips into 3 separate segments, each tied to a different input pin. I went through and set the effects the same on both. You'll see a little bit of twinkling going on right now. That's because there's some background noise from a refrigerator running. I could remove that out with some squelch on the settings, but we're going to go ahead and roll with this and see how much difference we can see between the 2 different processors. Here we go. Okay, just like before, I'm definitely seeing ESP8266 is lagging behind syncing with the music compared to the ESP32. Although I will admit that I'm seeing a little bit of lag with the ESP32 in terms of staying in sync with the music, especially that red on the far left. But across the board, definitely seeing that the ESP32 is still much more sound reactive with a lot less lag. We're now using 3 different output pins and 3 different segments. So I think what I'm going to try next, and I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to go ahead and hook up all 600 pixels together, and then try to look at maybe some of the matrix effects, and also just to see how the ESP8266 does with sound reactions when we're looking at possibly up to 600 pixels. So, okay, so real quick, I've reconfigured this board. So instead of having 3 output signals coming from the microcontroller, where the ESP8266, the ESP32, into each individual strips, there's now a single output signal coming into the first strip and traveling serpentine style through all 600 pixels. That did require some additional power injection to make sure we're not seeing any voltage drop issues. So besides the start and the end of the strip, we also have power injection at 2 points mid-strip. Probably overkill for 600 pixels, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't seeing any problems due to voltage drops on the LED strips. Okay, so let's fire up the ESP8266, and there we are with all 600 pixels lit. And just to give you an idea, again, I talked about the way that the signal runs. You can easily see it here with this wipe effect. The signal is basically serpentine back and forth. Not seeing any problems there with either flicker or any kind of performance problems. Let's try a couple of other things here just to make sure we're not seeing any issues. Again, I'm seeing no performance issues there. So 600 pixels with a single channel on ESP8266 isn't a problem. So let's move over to the sound reactive and give that a shot. Okay, once again, sorry about the same music, but here we go. And once again, we'll try some different effects here. Seems to be okay, but it does seem to be lagging at certain points. And I've definitely found that different effects can benefit from different gain levels. Obviously, you've got a lot less options here. Try adding a second color and see if that helps. You know, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Again, I'm not really seeing any lag, but it's kind of hard to know when you can't compare it to the ESP32 side by side. So it does work with 600 pixels. Again, we don't have those matrix options, which we're going to have and we're going to play with next with the ESP32. So Let me tear down, connect the ESP32, and we'll come back and try it again. Okay, now we've got the ESP32 hooked up. Everything's exactly the same with one small change. Under the LED preferences, remember we had that option for a matrix? So what I've done in this case, I've told it my matrix is basically 6 rows and 100 columns, and that it's running serpentine. So that's the only difference between the ESP8266 and the ESP32. So the one thing we've got now is we do have those additional matrix non-sound reactive. And to be honest, I've not seen these before, so some of these are brand new to me. But these options, again, are only set up with a matrix and only available on the ESP32. So there's some different options there, but of course what we care about is the sound reactive version. So let's give that a shot now. Now the one thing I'm noticing with having this matrix, I'm getting things duplicated on both halves, where before it was really just one with the ESP8266. So kind of having that matrix is kind of a nice option here. You get more of the 600 pixels lit at the same time. Let's take a look at a couple of these 2D versions that are only available on the ESP32. So again, I'm seeing no performance issues. It does seem to be staying pretty well in sync with the music. Now some of these frequency things I think could be tweaked by some of these frequency settings up here, but I haven't messed with those, and this video is already too long, so we're not going to take a look at that. So there's the ESP32 with 600 pixels in a matrix configuration running sound reactive WLED. So what are the results of my very scientific test? Well, again, my opinion is that if you're going to be using standard WLED on anything of about 1,000 pixels or less, you're probably fine using the ESP8266. However, if you're going to use the sound reactive version of WLED, I would recommend that you go with the ESP32. You're going to get much better performance, better synchronization with your music, more effects and more options, and overall just better performance out of the ESP32. If you are interested in building your own WLED controller, I'll leave a link down below to another video I've got that talks about building your own WLED controller for about $6. Now that is using the ESP8266. I'll also leave links down below to all the parts that I used in terms of the logic level shifters, the actual boards themselves, the LED strips. I'll leave links down below to all those parts as well. If you found anything in this video useful or that you liked, please hit that like button. That lets both me and YouTube know that you'd like to see more videos like this. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell icon, and you'll be notified every time I release a new video. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.